From the deep cold of the late Pleistocene, when winter was not a season, but a geography that stretched unbroken from the Atlantic to the Pacific, the lineage that would become modern humans faced a single, relentless adversary: the cold. Long before metal, agriculture, or writing, before villages or kingdoms, the greatest human innovation was not a tool of stone or bone, but the ability to carve shelter and safety out of a world that seemed determined to kill. This is the story of how early humans learned to bind skins around their bodies, raise structures against the wind, and ultimately master the Ice Age rather than be erased by it. The journey began in Africa, where Homo sapiens first arose in warm environments that did not demand heavy insulation. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived with minimal coverings, if any, protected by the same adaptive suite shared by other savanna mammals: sweat glands to cool the body, subcutaneous fat, and thermoregulatory behavior. But as human curiosity and hunger pushed bands of people northward along the Nile, across the Sinai, and into the Levant, they began encountering climates far colder than the ones that shaped their biology. At first, seasonal chills could be countered with fire and temporary windbreaks, but as global climate shifted toward glacial extremes, survival required something more profound. The first step toward true clothing was scavenging. Long before humans became confident hunters, they approached carcasses left by lions, wolves, or cave hyenas. From these kills, they stripped not only meat, but hides. At first, these hides were crude, unprocessed sheets of tough animal skin draped over shoulders or wrapped around the body. But even this primitive covering was transformative. A layer of hide provided insulation, a barrier against wind, and protection during sleep. Archaeological sites in the Levant from over 120,000 years ago show cut marks on animal bones consistent with hide removal, suggesting that the earliest clothing traditions were already forming. But real mastery came not from draping skins loosely, but from transforming them. Rawhide stiffens and rots. It had to be tanned. This required scraping, washing, softening with animal fats and brain oils, stretching, and drying. These steps turned a hide from something temporary into something durable and workable. Though we lack direct physical evidence, early skins rarely survive. The tools do. At sites like Hafza and School, stone scrapers built precisely for hide working appear with increasing frequency, their edges worn smooth by repeated passes over tough animal skins. As humans expanded into Eurasia, the pressure to innovate intensified. The climate grew harsher, the winters longer. Around 70,000 to 50,000 years ago, climatic oscillations pulled cold air masses deep into the Near East, and human groups that had once lived in mild warmth suddenly faced freezing nights and unpredictable storms. In this crucible, clothing became essential. Needles carved from bone, some over 40,000 years old, appear in Siberia, Mongolia, and the Chinese cave systems. These were not casual or incidental tools. They indicate tailored clothing, garments cut, shaped, and stitched with sinew. This level of refinement suggests not only survival engineering, but culture. Techniques passed to apprentices, styles learned in childhood, and skills woven into the identity of a community. With better clothing came the confidence to push farther north. The expansion into Europe beginning around 45,000 years ago was not a gentle migration, but a test of resilience. The continent was a landscape carved by ice sheets, dotted with mammoth steppe grasses, and prowled by predators that dwarfed anything found in Africa. Here shelter became as crucial as clothing. Early humans built with what the environment provided: wood where forests allowed, stone in the uplands, and in the far northern plains where timber was scarce, the bones and tusks of mammoths. The famous mammoth bone dwellings of the Eastern European steppe, circular huts with roofs made of hides stretched over rib bones and tusks, are more than just engineering feats. They represent the emergence of planned architecture. Entrances were oriented away from the prevailing winds. Hearths were carefully placed at the center of the structure for optimal heat circulation. Layers of skins were used to trap warmth. These were not temporary shelters tossed up for a night. They were homes, built to last through long winters. In some cases, clusters of dwellings indicate entire winter villages. But both clothing and shelter were only parts of a larger system, one that included fire mastery, resource planning, and social cohesion. The Ice Age was not a world where any single innovation was sufficient. Fire provided heat, yes, but also a way to dry hides, smoke meat, and harden tools. The construction of windbreaks and sleeping platforms reduced heat loss from the frozen ground. Stone-lined hearths created localized microclimates inside dwellings, raising the temperature by dozens of degrees. In this way, humans created artificial environments within environments, the earliest form of climate control. Meanwhile, clothing diversified. In colder regions, people layered garments. Inner layers of soft fur facing inward hides, outer layers of tougher materials that blocked wind and snow. Footwear evolved into insulated moccasin-like shoes. Hoods and face coverings emerged to protect from frostbite. This was the dawn of fashion not as decoration, but as survival technology. Functional design perfected through trial, error, and accumulated generational knowledge. With every innovation, human bodies adapted culturally rather than biologically. Neanderthals, who shared these landscapes with Homo sapiens, had bulkier builds and shorter limbs to conserve heat. Humans, by contrast, retained their tropical physiques, long limbs, narrow bodies, and compensated entirely through ingenuity. Clothing became an external skin. Shelter became an external skeleton. Culture itself became an evolutionary strategy. By 30,000 years ago, humans had crossed into regions once thought uninhabitable. The coldest permafrost tundras of Siberia, the subarctic fringes of Europe, and even the interior of the Russian plains. These became human domains. And then came the greatest test of all, the crossing into the Americas. Whether by coastal migration or through the Bering Land Bridge, a frozen corridor that could plunge below -40 degrees Celsius, humans survived because they brought their portable environment with them. Clothing insulated them, shelters protected them, fire empowered them. Without these technologies, the journey would have been impossible. But the Ice Age was not static. Climate shifted constantly. Glaciers advanced and retreated, rivers froze and thawed, animals migrated across thousand-mile distances. In response, human ingenuity accelerated. People learned to cache food for winter scarcity, to create multi-layered dwellings insulated with snow, to sew fitted garments that allowed movement during hunting. The cold did not diminish their capacity for innovation, it sharpened it. By the time the Ice Age began its long retreat around 20,000 years ago, humans stood not as refugees of a hostile climate, but as its masters. Clothing and shelter had become more than survival tools. They were cultural anchors. The skills required to cut hides, tan skins, sew garments, and build windproof structures were passed down like sacred knowledge. They shaped identity, gender roles, and social structure. They allowed population growth, long-distance migration, and the exploration of nearly every biome on Earth. In the end, the Ice Age did not forge humanity through brute challenge alone.
It forged us by forcing the creation of technology, cooperation, and foresight. Fire warmed us. Clothing shielded us. Shelter sustained us. But it was imagination, the ability to see possibility where others only saw cold and darkness, that ensured our survival. Humanity mastered the Ice Age not through strength or numbers, but through the ability to build a world within a world. And from that insulated circle of firelight and fur, civilization began.